there's someone.
Magic in the music. Almost every Fats Domino record really would put me away, and I had no idea this is New Orleans, this is a whole musical style. I just knew I liked this guy. So yeah, Ain't That a Shame and Blueberry Hill, that was really important. And then learning how to play That'll Be the Day, that was another kind of a focus for about 4 months as I was trying to play it without putting my tongue on my lip.
I was blessed to have musical parents. My mother played piano. She was a closet piano player. Nobody knew that she played the piano. And my dad was an audiophile. So I grew up listening to albums from, wow, Broadway shows, what they call in England tattoo, all of the tromping songs from in the bands in England. All of that stuff we had in the house.
I listened to a lot of music when I was young because my mother loved music, so she loved singing and she would sing along with the radio. I listened to a ton of top 40 radio, and we had a certain number of albums that, and I can tell you all of the albums that we had because I listened to all of those over and over again, long play albums. So we had Carmen, and we had Beethoven's Fifth and Beethoven's Seventh, and we had Barry Manilow, and Air Supply, and Neil Diamond, and no jazz. The closest thing we had to jazz was probably John Denver, so that tells you we did not get really close to jazz. I learned jazz I started to listen to jazz when I was in college, so that was a huge gap. And we had the Mozart piano concertos, a set of Mozart piano concertos played by Ingrid Haebler. And Barbra Streisand, greatest hits. So a mix of sort of top 40 and top 40 classical, best hits classical was what I listened to.
Soul and blues and yeah.
They'll probably run longer.
I listened to my mom's records. That was Fats Waller and his rhythm, Olatunji's Drums of Passion, and a lot of Harry Belafonte records. And that and just symphonies and stuff on the radio. I used to listen to all that.
We listened to classical music, we listened to Pete Seeger, Woody Guthrie, and very little else. My sister started bringing rock in, but I was more into the folk end. Crosby, Stills and Nash I listened to. I liked Loggins and Messina, and they had a fiddle player too, so that was really, really influential to me. So I would start to copy all the fiddle parts, and that was the first time I realized that there were violins outside of the classical world. Was through Loggins and Messina.
And also Nina Simone. It's hard to pick.
Oh,
I'm starting to think of so many different
I know
ones.
now. You're right.
And
Nina,
then
same thing.
and like Amadé Ardouin was one of the first accordion players, Creole accordion players. And Zydeco music, and that music just totally takes me to another place and another part of myself that I like to try to get in touch with.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I'm not even thinking of the fiddle players,
Yeah.
Papa John Creed, Sugarcane Harris, those two are, again, I sound nothing like them. No one will ever sound anything like either one of those artists, but they were pioneering in what they did, and they were masterful. I will always be chasing the chemtrails they left in the sound and in their ability to take the violin and really fuse together all of its
ramifications really and make a singular, very individual sound for both of those artists. I think I'm going to be always wanting to try to achieve that.
Sleepy John Estes kind of did that for me.
I think music came to me on the radio back in the early 50s, really, is when I really became aware of it. And I went through a phase. I grew up in Boston, south, just outside of Boston, in a town called Dedham, Massachusetts. And so the 1950, 51 in there, all the high school kids were supposed to listen to a show called Boston Ballroom, and they had a theme song was Benny Goodman's "Let's Dance," and although I don't think I knew who Benny Goodman was at the time, I just heard this song, and then as far as songs with words were concerned, the senior classes in high school would be asked their favorite song, and at that time their favorite song every year was Stardust. La da 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 da. And then I was told to listen to this other radio station that none of the high school kids were listening to, and that was this WCOP, and that's where I heard hillbilly music, and I heard Hank Williams, and that was the first thing that really got to me. He had a big hit of "Your Cheating Heart" at the time. "Your cheating heart will tell on you." And then "I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry." That song really got to my teenage heart. And the other thing that happened at that time was R&B came in, and there was another radio station that played black music. The disc jockey was famous. His name was Symphony Civic. In the afternoon, he was playing R&B, which, of course, at that time exploded into the white world. It had existed, of course, for a long time in the black world, but at this point, and mainly due to Fats Domino and Little Richard, they were the ones that really got across to a wide audience. And then, so I was listening to that radio station after WCOP kind of changed their format, and then I said at night was playing jazz, so I heard Dizzy Gillespie and Duke Ellington and people like that, and at 5 o'clock for an hour he played gospel music, so I heard Sister Rosetta Tharpe and Mahalia Jackson, the Five Blind Boys of Alabama, stuff like that. And that was extremely exciting music. It had such power. And both the country music, the hillbilly music, and that black music had so much vitality to it. And I think that's what I was really responding to it. I didn't find that in my quiet suburban life. It just wasn't around.
When I was a kid, I listened to the Mary Poppins soundtrack endlessly. And that is my strongest memory as a kid. Oh, and the Beatles. So if I think about sitting next to a record player as a kid, it would either be the Mary Poppins soundtrack or each new Beatles album that came out. They came out every 8 months or something. And then, the AM radio. Cousin Brucey, WABC, New York. That was everything. We heard all our music off of one radio station. Can you imagine? And that was what's so glorious, is that when I grew up, I know I sound like an old fart now, but the idea that the Beatles, and then suddenly it was Peggy Lee singing "Is That All There Is?" And then suddenly it was the Rolling Stones, and then it was Frank Sinatra singing "My Way." It was all on one radio station, and you sort of had to listen to everything to get to the things that you might want to be hearing, but I got to hear all those things. It's fantastic.
I think some of the first music that I remember listening to was listening to the Beatles' White Album, and I used to play it from beginning to end, back and forth, so all of the songs, starting with Back in the USSR, and hearing the planes go over. That was really always fun. But Rocky Raccoon was something that I just loved. So definitely the Beatles, but we also had, I was growing up in the 70s, and Saturday Night Fever and disco was big, and so we had the soundtrack for the movie Saturday Night Fever, and so I used to dance and jump off of the couch and land on my knees, you know, as John Travolta would have, you know, run and danced and, you know, slid across the dance floor on his knees. So I was doing that at 6 years old, having a great time, which is probably why I can't walk very well now, but I just loved the danceable, you know, disco music.
Simon and Garfunkel. There was another big album from when I was a kid. Major, major. How could I have forgotten? Anyway, I listened to a ton of Simon and Garfunkel, and then when I started buying albums, I bought every single Simon and Garfunkel album, and then every single Paul Simon album, and that was the first artist that I really sunk into.
I have other very distinct memories of, we had this long radio that was the first time we had an FM radio in the house. And I have very distinct memories of turning that dial, hoping to find Roberta Flack, First Time Ever I Saw Your Face. When that record came out, I was so obsessed with it. And I would just keep turning the dial, hoping I would find it playing on something. And I remember doing the same thing to hear, not so much the Barry Manilow intro to I Write the Songs, but when it got to this, oh my God, I wanted to know what those chords were. I mean, I love the record, but it was that measure that I was most entranced with.
My dad is very musically inclined as well, and he played a lot of very complicated fusion type progressive music that was very complex, and I remember hearing a lot of that, which was complicated for a young kid to understand, but also really beneficial, you know. And I also remember hearing songs on the radio, which were quite the opposite of my dad's music, which were very simple and pop music based, but I do remember those melodies and those different songs, you know. Summer Breeze, I forget who it's by, but it's an old 70s song, and I remember that very distinctly from when I think I was around 7 or so.
Can you sing it?
Yeah, it's Summer Breeze makes me feel nice. Da, 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 da. I always remember that melody.
My mom would sing Goodnight My Someone from The Music Man to me every night before I went to bed. Good night, my someone, good night, my love. Sleep tight, my someone, sleep tight, my love. And then it just keeps going.
My parents, they were musical, so they would just make up songs. So a song that I remember from my little wee days was called Patti Rookwood, that's me. And it went, it's a very popular tune, it went, Patti Rookwood, how are you? How are you? How's your mom and daddy? How's your mom and daddy? They're fine too, they're fine too. So we did that every day, either before Daddy went to work or when he came home. And he would ask me how I was. And that would be the answer.
There are a lot of judgments out there about what's good music and what's not good music. But those songs sat in me, you know, and physically got into my body. And I think from that kind of music, I have a really solid sense of beat and rhythm, and I can sit into a song. And I think I got it from that music. I love that music. I still love that music.
Good night, my someone, good night, my love. Sleep tight, my someone, sleep tight.
How's your mom and daddy? How's your mom and daddy? They're fine too, they're fine too.
makes me feel nice. Da 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 da.